It was real simple for the Edmonton Oilers. Connor McDavid said their goal for Game 5, drag the Panthers back to Alberta. We got a Game 6 Friday night.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On Oilers. I'm your host, Nick Zararis. Man, that was incredible. But before we get to today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So, today's episode, very straightforward. First segment, we're going to talk just how incredibly insane that game was at large. Second segment, we are going to bow at the altar of Connor McDavid and talk about his performance the last few games of this series. In particular, we'll hone in on tonight with that burden of greatness. We'll circle back to a topic we had touched on before the series started, what it means to him to have this opportunity. And then third and final segment, we are in business. All you had to do was get it to a Game 6 and you are very much alive. So starting with the macro, you got just about, I don't want to say this is kind of becoming the Oilers recipe, but you get a shorthanded goal and you get it from somebody you're not expecting goals from in your ledger. You get a Connor Brown goal. Yeah, you get off to a start like that, you're going to feel pretty good about yourself. I know for a lot of the regular season, the first 50, 60 games, Connor Brown wasn't really endearing himself a whole lot with the Oiler fan base because of the cap penalty the Oilers are going to have for him next year on the team based on the way they structured bonuses. But he's been one of their best penalty killers, if not their best penalty killer, and he gets them on the board first. That kind of gets them in the game. You heard me talk about that with Armando the other day, yesterday, going into Game 5 of you just need the Oilers to get their feet under them. You get a lead, you start to ease yourself in, and you see if Florida slips up. And very much like in Game 4, Florida started playing a bit more aggressively. They started pinching. And then Edmonton got going in transition. And we know that's Edmonton's key to success. They need to get the puck out quickly. They need to go from defense to offense quickly. And you really saw as they started to build out their lead, they put a lot of pressure on Florida's defensemen individually to make plays. And that's the trick to breaking Florida down. Because most of the time, what makes Florida's defense so effective, and this is something you see them talk about on the broadcast here in America. I'm not sure what it was like up there on Sportsnet, but ESPN has talked a lot about the fact that for the most part, the Panthers almost always have 5 players in the frame, especially when they're on defense. They're always around the puck. They're always putting on pressure. And when they do that, they have the ability to take advantage of the numbers advantage, the literal numbers advantage. And then number 2, on top of that, the thing that makes that difficult, it's hard to break down. And when you have 5 guys in a compressed space all around the puck, you're limited in what you can do as a puck carrier. Now, if you can start to single out guys on Edmonton, force this guy to play defense, if you got to force Brandon Montour or Oliver Ekman-Larsson or Kulikov, or even Nico Mikkola, who I think is probably their second best defensive defenseman after Forsling. If you force those guys to make one-on-one plays against a McDavid, against a Draisaitl, against a Hyman, or just in transition where you have speed and they're skating backwards, you're always going to skate faster forwards than a defenseman's going to be able to skate backwards. That's just the way physics work. You're going to be able to build up more speed skating straight fast than you will be able to skate backwards. You can skate pretty fast backwards, but nowhere near as fast as someone on Edmonton skating full speed. And that's the thing that makes Edmonton so dangerous. When they get the puck in transition and they're able to use their team speed, they start to come at you in waves. And because they're going down the ice, they're typically going to have 3 forwards close to or below the goal line, which is going to invite Florida to try and counter back and get back on offense quickly. And it turns the game a bit more up and down, a little bit less controlled, a little bit less cycle heavy, which is what Florida wants. And as the game went along, Edmonton did build out their lead, and eventually Florida started to work their way back into the game, it was through what I was just talking about. They got the puck in deep, forced Edmonton to play defense. They picked on Nurse, they picked on Cece. But when Edmonton was building out its lead, you got the look of the game you needed. You got McDavid to score the one goal. You got him to set up the Corey Perry goal. And yeah, Tkachuk scored in there, and that slowed it down. Evan Rodriguez scored in there. But now, if you're the Oilers, this is, you saw Drago bleed now, like in Rocky IV, like we talked about the other day, getting a win past Bobrovsky. Now he's leaking. And going into Game 4, I made the comparison that this was an MMA fight of a boxer, the Oilers, and a grappler, a jiu-jitsu guy or a wrestling guy in Florida, that once the fight got to the ground, the boxer was going to have a really difficult time. And for the first 3 rounds of the fight, the Oilers were on the ground getting tagged, getting their joints torn on, getting their limbs ripped at. But the bell, they rang the bell for the 4th round. They tagged the boxer a couple times. And yeah, the Oilers were still behind on points through 3 rounds, but now you won 2 rounds, and this fight still it's going to keep going until someone drops. This is old school. This is boxing until there's a knockout, like it was way back in the day. That's like the 20s and 30s of boxing. But the Oilers tagged Florida back. They caught them. They made them uncomfortable. And for the first real time in this series, you saw Florida looking uncomfortable. You saw their guys, especially in the defensive zone, making mistakes. You saw Florida not being able to mitigate Edmonton's speed through the neutral zone. When Edmonton can regroup in the defensive zone, quick breakout, carry the puck out full speed, that's going to make a world of difference for them. They are not a cycle team. They are not going to want to string together 9, 10, 11 passes in the offensive zone to generate a scoring chance. That's just not their game. It's not that they can't do that. It's that they are uncomfortable doing that. And professional athletes, they're always going to fall back on what gets them to the dance. And for Edmonton, that's in living in transition. The game tonight, that's not exactly how you draw it up. It definitely got hectic there at the end, a little bit helter-skelter there down the back ends. That I tweeted with about 8 minutes to go. The Oilers probably can't sustain this. Very lucky for them, Florida took a penalty in there. So the Oilers got to burn 2 of those 8 minutes on the power play. And then Florida pulls the goalie like 2:50-ish to go, something like that. And the Oilers, they burn their timeout in there. Once Florida gets a shot on goal, that burns some time. And they survive. Tkachuk makes a great play, to sweep that puck out as it was going down. That's a really good play. And the Panthers are definitely annoying, don't get me wrong. But the begrudging respect I'm forming for them as this series goes along, it's starting to calcify. I'm starting to feel a certain simpatico about the misery they are inflicting upon me, that I understand that that's what they do. But make no mistake, the Oilers are very much alive. We talked about the fire's coming. We've been in the fire. The Oilers been in the fire for 5 straight games now. Now, there's light at the end of that tunnel. Still a long way to go. Still got to take care of business on Friday. That building is going to be levitating how loud it is. It is going to be loud enough in there to get the building off of the ground Friday night. Cannot wait to see what that looks like. But before we get there, we're going to take a minute and bask in the glory of Connor McDavid. So be sure to stick around. We are getting to the end of it now. Stanley Cup Finals, game number 6 Friday night, Major League Baseball regular season in full swing, WNBA season in full swing, summer concert season. And if you want to get out there this summer, go to a show, go to a game, you've got to check in with our friends at Game Time. Some of the best features in the ticket business, all in pricing. Toggle this feature on, show the total up front, no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views, get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Most importantly, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you to everyone making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day. Whether you are on the way to work, on the way to school, in the gym, or you're saving it for the end of the day to kind of decompress, thanks for making the show part of your day. I know I definitely was nervous sitting there as this game started to develop, as it was starting to take its shape. And to pull that game out and to get the signature Connor McDavid performance you needed to force a Game 6, there is an entire 48 hours to digest, to process, to describe just how impressive that performance from McDavid and McDavid was. But I just want to, I struggle to put into words just how impressive he was tonight. I struggle to process that somebody is capable of playing that well. And I understand there's been a lot of, well, don't forget about McKinnon and Austin Matthews, and all of those people are having McDavid fatigue. This is undoubtedly the best hockey player in the world. This is the best hockey player I, myself, have ever seen. Wasn't alive for Gretzky. Was not alive, or I shouldn't say alive. I wasn't watching hockey when Mario Lemieux was still playing. I very obviously was not alive when Gordie Howe was playing. I was not alive when Bobby Orr was playing. Early career Sidney Crosby kind of felt like this. This is another planet. The stuff Connor McDavid is able to do, there is not a living person, there is not another living person that can do this. The play he made to set up the Corey Perry goal is just ludicrous. It is not something the rational human mind thinks. And that's what makes it all the more impressive, is that McDavid has to make that decision as instinctual. You know, the way us lay people, the way we breathe and we don't have to think about it, that's how quick he has to make that decision. It's not like the rest of us when we're playing beer league of, okay, look up, I have the puck, keep moving my feet. What do? Do I pass? Do I shoot? He is making that decision so unbelievably fast that it's 4 or 5 moves in the span of maybe a second and a half. And not only do people not think that fast, how do people move that fast? That's not something that we lay people can fathom. You know, you driving a car on the highway, you feel like you're going pretty fast, and you got to make your decisions pretty fast when people are changing lanes around you, that type of thing. But to do it in that environment, in that situation, you just saw one of the great performances ever. You just saw one of the best Stanley Cup final performances ever. You saw him record 2 goals, 2 assists. He's got, I want to say, I think it's 8 points over the last 2 games, if I remember correctly. 9 points over the last 2 games. He is playing at a level the Oilers need. And it took him a little while to start finding the back of the net. The looks were still there. The quality scoring chances were still there. They just weren't beating Bobrovsky. They weren't making Florida play defense enough. And the dam broke. Whether or not they can sustain this for 2 more games, that's a different conversation. But right now, if you are a hockey fan, I know if you're an Oilers fan listening to this, but if you're just a neutral party and you just really like hockey and you wanted to hear an Oilers perspective on the game, you saw one of the great players ever have one of the great Stanley Cup final performances ever tonight. And we will talk about this playoff run for McDavid forever. I talked about it a lot when the Oilers made the conference final, beating Vancouver the way they did, where they kind of had to eke their way through. It took a lot to get through 7 games against Vancouver of just, hey, teams don't get to the conference final that often. Savor this. Get to the Stanley Cup final. It'd been 18 years? Yeah, 2006. Yeah, 18 years. Yeah. If you're new to the show, you just watched me do mental math in my head and you saw how bad I am at math. And there's a reason I'm doing sports media as opposed to math. But 18 years between Stanley Cup final appearances. I said, you will talk about them just making the Stanley Cup final for the rest of your life. Now we're venturing to a point that there's going to be a real conversation that even if the Oilers lose this series, that McDavid deserves to be the Conn Smythe because of just how otherworldly good he's been. And I'm not ready to entertain that conversation just yet because I want to see them win Game 6. And we're going to get there. We're going to get there. We have a whole 2 days to get there to talk about it. But they win a Game 6 and force a Game 7. I think we're rendering. I don't think there's an argument McDavid's not a Pantheon player. And I already argue he's right there with Sid, Mario, Gretzky. I argue he's already right there. I think he might be the most talented of all of those guys in terms of physical skills and the way he translates them to the environment he's in now. But I think you are watching the solidification, the calcification of an all-time great. And he is playing at a level now where if you aren't acknowledging this, you are coming across as a bitter grouch. There are not a lot of people who have ever played the game of hockey that were capable of the performance he delivered tonight. I mean, even defensively, at the end of the game, when Florida has the net pulled, he was playing the boards like a lunatic. I don't think McDavid gets enough credit for his ability to win puck battles, to use his elite skating to get into position to win loose pucks, and then to skate the puck out of danger in his own zone, get it down, and then to follow up on the play. There are a lot of star players in this league who will not follow up on the play. And after Tkachuk sweeps that puck out, if McDavid's not busting his butt to get down there, to try and get that puck, to try and put it on the net, Florida's going to have one more regroup. And they wouldn't have had a ton of time. You know, I want to say there was maybe 10, 15 seconds when they fought. Yeah, there was 19 seconds. I wanted to check. There was 19 seconds left when McDavid scored the empty net goal. There was 19 seconds. That's enough time for a regroup. And look, is it likely Florida gets a goal in that regroup? No, probably not. It isn't. But McDavid, because of the guy he is, because of the type of person he is, he made sure that didn't matter. He went down there, put the puck in the net, and as he promised, he said, my goal, our objective, drag them back to Edmonton, get them in deep water. And now, Florida's leaking. We're getting into the deep water now. We're getting into whatever metaphor you want to use. I've been using the fight metaphor, the fireman in the fire. You just heard me talk about the deep water, drown them in the deep end of the pool, make them uncomfortable. First real time you saw Florida look uncomfortable in this series was tonight. And you should feel great about that because we are getting into the nitty gritty. We are getting into the point where one of these two teams is going to have to find something deep in them to put this away in either team's favor. Either Florida needs to beat the best player in the world playing like an absolute lunatic, or Edmonton's going to win 2 straight games against probably the best team in the league. Either way, it's going to take something special to put this series away. And when push comes to shove, you bet on the best player in the world. We're going to take one more break. Be right back. Tie a bow on Game 5. Start setting the table for Game number 6. So please be sure to stick around. Thank you to everybody watching, listening, however you're consuming today's episode. And look, this has been an incredible journey just to get to Game 6. Just to get to Game 6. There are no moral victories this time of year. There is no... Well, but when you're talking about how a season ends, when you get this far, when it takes the level of effort it's taken Edmonton to get here. If you told me a month ago, going into game like 5 or 6 against Vancouver, that Edmonton was going to be in game 6 of the Stanley Cup final, going back to Alberta against Florida, I would have looked at you and said, okay, well, what's the series? And then you say 3-2 Florida. I would have said, well, is McDavid playing well? And I would have said, yes, he's been the best player in the series. It took him a little while to get going, but he has started to win the minutes he's been out there. He's done a fantastic job in the minutes he's been out there, especially not against Barkov. Against Barkov, it's been really close in terms of scoring chances, high danger. Those two are having an epic game of cat and mouse in the hard match when Florida's had last change, but they are here. This is nothing to sneeze at. You just saw one of the great Stanley Cup final performances of all time. You are going back to your barn. It is going to sound like a wind tunnel in there, how loud it is. Edmonton gets that first goal Friday night. That place the roof is going to come off. The Oilers are at a point now where it is. I don't want to quote the water boy and say you can't hold anything back. They obviously haven't the last 2 games. They got to get to their game first, and that's the key. The Oilers are a score impacts team. When they are playing from behind, other teams will have an easier job slowing them down because of how they like to play. The transition, the up and down, that's going to invite Florida to take chances. Playing with a lead, you're more inclined to take those chances when they're there. And Florida doesn't really do that a whole lot. Florida is really good at tamping the game down, slowing the tempo down. And as they work their way back into game 5, and you saw it happen there in that third period where cycle, rebound, deflection, failed exit, rebound, cycle, failed exit, cycle, Kachuk goal. It happened. They have a sticky style. The way they want to play translates very well to this time of year and against a speed and a skilled team. The Oilers showed a lot of resolve, not breaking. They bent a whole lot in that third period, but Florida pushed. Florida made the type of all hands on deck push to get back in that game. And like I said, at 8 minutes to go, it felt like the Oilers were on as thin ice as imaginable, and that they weren't going to be able to survive that long, but they pulled it out. The Oilers at this point have shown you they can hang with the Panthers. You could argue that over the last 3 games, the Oilers have won 7 of the 9 periods, 8 of the 9, probably 7. You'd probably say the Oilers have won 7 of the 9, because you wouldn't say they won the third period tonight, and then you wouldn't say they won the second. I think it was the second period of game 3 back in Edmonton, where Florida scored the 3 goals in pretty succession in the second period. But the Oilers have shown the ability that they can hang with Florida. They can play style that makes Florida uncomfortable. It's simply a matter of getting there. It's harder for Florida chasing a lead than it is for Edmonton, simply because of the way they want to play. Florida is volume. Florida is wear you down. They're a low shooting percentage team because they throw a lot on the net. They clean that up with rebounds. They clean that up with second chance scoring opportunities. They love being around the net front. They love putting pressure on your defensemen to clear the crease. They are a really good team. The Oilers are showing you they are a really good team too. The Oilers are showing you that they have the conviction and they have the fortitude to withstand this. And they are in this series now. I said going into game 5 that if you really want to change the narrative and start saying there's pressure on Florida, you needed to win a game 5. A, because you needed to keep the season going, obviously. But B, and more importantly, now there's real heat on them. You up 3 games to none. How come you can't put away the team with the goalie with the sub 900 save percentage? How come you can't put away the team that's playing Cody Ceci and Darnell Nurse? How come you can't put away the team that can't score at 5-on-5? Florida's not feeling heat yet. They're going to start feeling the heat when the first words of the Star-Spangled Banner come out Friday night. We're in the danger zone, the fun zone. What at this point, the Oilers are playing with house money. They force a game 7. Anything is on the table. Best player in the world and like the third or fourth best player in the world, depending on how you feel about Leon Draisaitl. Do or die game after winning 3 straight games. You saw the stats. You saw the winning streaks the Oilers were able to put together after losing 3 straight games during the regular season. 15, I think it was 8, and then another 5. The Oilers can do this. The Oilers are absolutely capable of doing this. I've said it quite a few times as they've started to work their way back into this series. They are capable of doing it. It is simply a matter of going out there and making it happen. You saw Connor McDavid play like a man possessed. You get that. You can do anything. You can do absolutely anything. And now it's on your terms. You get to play with your matchups. You get to avoid Barkov when you send McDavid out there. You get to try and avoid Barkov when Draisaitl's out there. You can try and take advantage of Lundell or Luosterainen. Just get them out there against Ekman-Larsson and Kulikov. You start getting your matchups. You start wearing the game away. You put yourself in a position to play the best possible game you can. And you go from there. If you lose with your best possible effort, you can't live with that, but it's a hell of a lot better than leaving something on the table. But we got a whole lot of time to start talking about Game 6 before we get there. So that will just about do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Before we get out of here, do want to say rest in peace to Willie Mays, one of the 4 best baseball players ever, one of the most important athletes in the history of New York City. That's one of those guys that they tell you the stories, you see the film reels in black and white, and they tell you he was the best. And then you go and look at the numbers, and the numbers are even better than everyone says he was. So thinking about that, thinking about greatness as a quantifiable trait, and thinking about there aren't a lot of guys like that anymore, man. So that will do it for today's show. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple or Spotify, please throw the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, please subscribe, hit that alarm bell, leave me a notification. Tell me if you were alive to see McDavid. Yes, I'm alive. I'm alive. If you were alive to see Mario Lemieux play at his peak, to see Gretzky at his peak, or Bobby Orr, Gordie Howe, whichever. Did they feel like this? Did they feel like a force of nature like this? Let me know in the comments. I will talk to you guys real soon. Till then, let's go Oilers.